Annuals are plants that complete their life cycle in 1 year. The seed sprouts, they grow, they flower, they die, and set seed, all in the same season or year. Hardy annuals are annuals, but their seeds aren't bothered by freezes and their seedlings aren't bothered by frosts. So they will sprout even in cold weather and get you a jump start on your spring color. I'll show you how to get these started now. So come spring, your flower beds will be filled with color that you started from seed. Hey, I'm Brian with Next Level Gardening. If you're looking to join an online garden community that offers tips, tricks, and support to help take your garden to the next level, you're in the right place. Get started now by clicking subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss anything. Now let's get growing. So I'm going to be in need of a lot of flowers this spring to fill the cottage garden that's in front of our new English cottage chicken coop. You can see it back there. Now, if you are watching on our homestead channel, and if you're not, I'll put a link right up here and down in the video description. You've been watching the process of this cottage coming along for several months now. And we're getting really close. The thatch roof is probably going to go on in another 2 weeks. We've got some painting to do and some more stucco, but on the Homestead channel, you get to see all that behind the scenes and more in-depth coverage of projects around here. So some popular hardy annuals would include snapdragons, stock, pansies or viola, love in a mist or nigella, nasturtium, ammi majus, and poppies. So when can you sow these seeds? Some can be sowed in the fall, and I did a video on that in the fall, and this is the outcome of that video. I've got lots of flower seedlings here to be able to keep growing. I just potted these up a couple of weeks ago, and some of them are a little bit discolored. They were a little bit worse. I fertilized them. A lot of times what happens is if it gets, there are these little containers, and if they get too much water, it washes the nutrients out of the potting mix. And we've had a ton of rain, and these have been outside all winter. And these are all cool season annuals. There are some perennials in here, but mostly cool season annuals. However, if you missed the window in October, now could be the time to plant them. You're looking at about 4 weeks before your last frost date, where you can go ahead and sow the seeds outside. Now, you could really go ahead and sow the seeds outside right now, either in trays, or if you can work the ground, you can sow them in the ground, and they'll just come up when it's time. Because again, these seeds are not bothered by frosts, snow, cold weather. Some of them are actually invigorated by that and spurred on to go ahead and germinate. But if you think about it, these plants all dropped their seeds when they started dying back in the fall or late summer, and their seeds sit on the ground all winter, and they know when to come up. So the timing doesn't have to be that perfect with hardy annuals. Now, once they're up, if you've started them, maybe you have a cold spell coming, you might want to protect them a little bit with some fleece or a fancy cloche. But this is for like a freeze. A frost is not going to bother them. One really easy way to do it is to take a plastic bottle, like a 2-liter soda bottle, and cut the bottom off, and you can just stick the whole thing right over it, leave the cap off for a little bit of ventilation. Now, you definitely want to take those off on a hot day. Now, you might want to know your frost date, because if it's going to take a while for you to be able to have these growing, maybe your frost date is way out, then you might want to start them in trays indoors. And you should just know your frost date anyways. So go down to the link in the video description for frost dates, and you'll be able to put in your zip code or where you live and find out what your first and last frost dates are for the year. Another link I'm going to leave down there is to the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society in England. They have, because all hardy annuals are not equally hardy. And so they have a great resource there where you can find out all the different plants you want to grow and how hardy they actually are, so you'll know when you can plant them or sow them to get the best, fastest results. Now, I'm going to be sowing seeds outside today, so I'm starting off with seeds that germinate when the temperatures outside during the day are between 55 and 65, because that's kind of what we've got going on right now. That's generally the coldest weather that seeds will germinate in. And so if you're way out from that, like I said, you can start these indoors or just go ahead and sow them if your ground is workable outdoors or in trays, and they'll come up when your temperatures start to reach 55 to 65 in the daytime. So my goal or color scheme for the cottage garden is to keep it soft and pastels. So lots of pinks, lavenders, blues, white. So a lot of the sweet peas, sweet peas is a big thing I'm going to grow on teepees here to give some height. And a lot of the mixed sweet peas that you buy have a lot of red and deep purple and things that aren't really going to be the color palette here in the cottage garden. So we're actually growing two different ones. You can buy sweet peas where it's just one variety. It doesn't have to be the full color mix. This one is Molly Rillstone. So it's kind of a pinky apricot. And this one is Erewhon, E-R-E-W-H-O-N. Growing some giant imperial larkspur. It does look like there's a little bit of purple in there. Hopefully it's the least amount of what's in this package. Some nepeta or catmint. You can't see this picture. I'll put one on the screen. But that's going to give me some masses of kind of some lavender spikes throughout the garden. And I'm going to try some poppies. Technically, I should have planted those or sown those in the fall, and they would be coming up now. But I'm going to try it anyway. I've got the seed, and I want to see kind of what my options are here in terms of spring versus fall planting. I know we have colder winters here than we had at our last house, and I definitely planted the poppies in the fall there. The problem is we have hotter summers here, and that will knock the poppies down quick. If you have mild summer temperatures though, you can go ahead and plant the poppies now and they'll be just fine for you. So for the sweet peas, I am trying something that I have not tried before, and that is using these root trainers. Now, root trainers are interesting. Now, I will say you can also use toilet paper tubes. The thing that you want for sweet peas, for any type of legume, is a long root run, deep root run. So you can see these are deep, about the depth of a toilet paper tube. Toilet paper tubes can, if you have to grow them indoors for a long period of time, or you can't plant out for a long period of time, they can get soggy and start to disintegrate depending on the length of time. So I am going to give these a try. I'm not endorsing this particular one because I've never tried it before. It does feel flimsy. However, all of the ones I've seen people use look flimsy. So I just think maybe that's how they are. But what happens is these open up and they allow you to check the roots. And what you'll see on the edges of these, there's grooves, and those train the roots to go into those grooves and point them straight down, so they go very deep. You can also open these up and take a look at the root structure. So for those of you who are impatient like me, you can open them up without really disturbing them. And then when it's time to plant them out, you open it up and you just tip them out and plant them in their hole. So there's very little root disturbance, which legumes don't like, root disturbance. So the first thing we're going to do is fill these up with pre-moistened potting mix. I'm going to remember to label these so I don't forget what the variety is, especially if I love them and I want to do them next year. Okay. So sweet peas are to be sown about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. They do like to germinate at temperatures between 55 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to put 2 seeds per cell. So I'm just going to set them on top and then I'll push them in. If I push them in as I go, sometimes I forget. I look off somewhere, ADHD, and look back, then I forget where I put the last ones. Now you can also sow these directly in the ground, and you want to give them something to climb on no matter how you sow them. These will get about 6 feet tall, and so you definitely want to make sure that they've got a structure to climb on. It could be a fence, it could be a trellis. I'm going to be growing mine up teepees. I'm going to actually take long branches from these eucalyptus back here, about 4 or 5, tie them together at the top, spread them out at the bottom, about 2 to 3 feet in diameter at the bottom. And you can plant 2 to 3 sweet peas at the bottom of each one of the canes. You can use bamboo as well. And at first, you might want to assist them in finding their way up the canes. You might want to tie them a little bit, but just the first, when the plant's maybe 6 to 8 inches tall, after that, it's going to figure things out on its own. Fill that in with potting mix. And sweet peas are actually poisonous, so don't plant them near other peas, because if you can't tell the difference, if you haven't been growing long, then that could be a problem. You don't want to eat these. Now we're going to put the humidity dome on top, and this is just going to keep the moisture in. We don't really want this heating up. And so I would put this someplace, if you're doing it inside, fine, put this on top, put them under the grow lights, and let it be. Outside, however, I don't want the sun beating in here and this humidity dome heating up the whole structure, because then they'll be too warm and they may not germinate. So I'm going to put these in kind of morning sun and then so they might get an hour, maybe 2 at the most of sun in the morning, and then shade, and that's really just to regulate the temperature, give them a little boost in the morning. They don't need light to germinate. They're an inch down. They don't get light anyway. However, once you start to see germination, once they start popping through the top, you remove this and you're done with it. You don't put it back on. Move them into full sun and keep them well watered. All right, so I'm back up in the cottage garden, and I'm going to be sowing directly this time. So along the path here in the cottage garden, I have planted bearded iris and then muscari bulbs and daffodil bulbs, which are coming up right now. And so I'm going to do some planting in some of the blank spots between them. And I'm going to do some poppy frosted salmon. These are the bread seed poppies. Now, the thing about sowing in the ground is you have a little less control over everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is prepare the soil. I'm going to scratch a little bit of the soil up just to kind of loosen it a bit. And then I want to make sure that the first roots that touch down are going to come into something that is very soothing and nourishing and will get them off to a great start. So I'm going to be using some of the seed starting mix, just like I would use if I was sowing in a tray. By the way, I'm going to put a link to this down below. I'm not sponsored or anything, but this was the best price for such a large bag of seed starting mix on Amazon. And it looks like really good stuff. So just make sure the area is prepped, make sure it's flat, take out any weeds. And then we're going to sprinkle just a thin layer of the seed starting mix down. And we want to moisten the whole area now. So once we're at this point, we're ready to sow the seeds. And poppy seeds are super small, and so you really don't want to cover them very much at all. In fact, with soil, you don't want to cover them at all. So we're going to lightly just sprinkle them over the area. Not too many. The final spacing really should be a foot apart, so these are going to have to be thinned. And because they don't like to be covered, they really need some light to germinate. We're going to be covering them with vermiculite, which holds the moisture in, which is really why you want to cover them. But it also lets light in, unlike soil or potting mix. And you want to make sure you have a very fine grade vermiculite. And we're going to just sprinkle it over the area. You want to make sure it covers. It's going to, again, hold in moisture, but let the light in at the same time. I'm going to water it again. And just make sure that you check on this daily, especially on days where it's not going to rain or where it's really sunny, and make sure that it's always moist. Another thing the vermiculite does is it marks the soil. You know, because of this shiny gold stuff, that you've got something sowed there. So don't walk there or don't put something else there. Now, if you're not using vermiculite or you're sowing larger size seeds that are actually buried, I like to sow them in a pattern, like a line or an X or a circle. And what happens with that is you're going to see the seeds start to come up in a specific pattern. Because a big question I always get is how do you, if you're sowing them outside directly into the garden, how do you know the difference between a weed and what you actually want to grow? And so if you have it planted in a specific shape and you see them coming up in that shape, then anything outside of that shape is obviously a weed. So just a little pro tip. So that's it. In just a few months, we're going to have all of these flowers filling this cottage garden. Can't tell you how good it feels to actually, after living here a year and a half and this being under construction, but getting close to finishing, having the ground prepped, at least on this side. I got to work on this side still. But to think that in just a few months, we're going to have an English cottage with a thatched roof and a whole cottage garden full of color in front of it, where before there was just cactus and weeds. I can't wait. If you learned something, please give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with a gardening friend, and I'll see you next time.